And white people generally are the least racist people on earth. I mean that in a very technical way. There have been studies of racial consciousness. White people have the lowest racial consciousness by a country mile. Every other race of people has a much higher racial consciousness, a much higher in-group preference. White people just are not racist. You can say whatever you want about white people. You can say they have bad taste in music, their food isn't spicy enough, but you can't say they're racist. White people are the least racist people in the world. And in the United States, the white people are pretty much the only victims of formal de jure systemic racism. Asians get lumped in a little bit too, but white people, and Asians to some degree, are the only group where you can say, okay, you're white, we're going to discriminate against you for the purposes of college admissions, for the purposes of hiring, for the purposes of whatever, on the basis of your race. So the racism charge generally falls flat. The racism charge against Trump definitely falls flat, and they don't have any other charge.
No charges at all. Michael Knowles there steps in, since conservatives are always talking about not teaching our actual history. Here's the opportunity to reteach it in a BS way. It's a perfect system that they've got here. So apparently white folks are victims of systemic racism. The only way white folks can be victims of systemic racism is if systemic racism exists. I've been hearing for the past few years that systemic racism is a myth. It's not there. How did it just pop up? This is really weird how this works. Hiring, school, everything. It's odd how this whole thing works. One of these things that he's going over and talking about some of the ways that people, I'm sorry, also white folks don't have a consciousness of race. Just not at all. They don't see it. It's not at all. By the way, if you're missing it, that's probably part of the problem. You're ignorant to the problem because you ignore it. You never had to be affected by it, many folks. So therefore, that's where they are. So one of these maneuvers is from the federal government, was with redlining. Is that one of the things that white folks have been dealing with systemic racism over this whole time? Because there's this NPR article that talks about these things. They said it was a forgotten history of how the U.S. government segregated America. If you guys haven't heard about redlining, maybe you should check that out because it's been a doozy on white folks in the history of our country. Also, by the way, how about racial profiling with police officers? You know how white folks are always in the streets talking about how they're indiscriminately killed by police officers at a much larger rate than black folks. Oh, my bad. Actually, black people are still being killed by police at a higher rate than other groups, despite the fact that there's fewer black folks in America than white folks here. Crazy how that works. Hey, I've got a little bit more. How about healthcare? Disparities in health and healthcare among black people actually affect people's health and health care. Also, once they're in the doctor, we've seen the mortality rates of black pregnant moms and how they actually don't get the same kind of care or concern or belief systems whether or not the pain that they're going through. This happens. It's been documented. We've seen the rates. But still, listen to Michael Knowles when he says that white folks are dealing with systemic racism. Oh, also, by the way, this whole history about segregation in schools that he's talking about and how they don't have access to it. The U.S. student population is more diverse. Nice win there. But schools are still highly segregated. Now, the way that they do this, though, is, of course, you corner people in certain schools, and then when you strip certain communities of their resources and also from those schools having certain monies to go into it, those schools are worse. And then when you send and certain kids are in those schools, then that's a different way of segregating folks and actually putting them in educational systems where they can't get ahead. You know, that whole opportunity in America myth that we like to push. There's another aspect of how systemic racism only affects white people, according to Michael Knowles. Because, you know, we've had these fights in professional settings and in schools. But there's another article that talked about how wearing natural hairstyles harms job prospects for black women. Here's some aspects of it. Wearing natural hairstyles is one factor that's shown by academic research to affect the job prospects of black women. But don't listen to academic research, listen to Michael Knowles. Also, corporate environments are still largely, they conform to standards of personal appearance based on white beauty norms. They just had bills in state legislators talking about whether or not black folks can wear their hair a certain way. Still, I think it was like last year. But no, listen to Michael Knowles when he says white folks are constantly being discriminated against in this country because they have to make room for anybody else. That's the basis for this anger it was.
Yeah, I mean, this guy is clearly a clown. I think there are critiques to be made of these race-based policies, and I do think these policies can have an adverse effect on white people. But we got to remember which white people we are talking about. Not all white people are the same. A lot of times these race-based policies, when the powers that be decide like, yo, we're just going to do these little band-aids and we're going to move on with our lives, they actually do affect the poorest of whites and the masses of whites. Yeah. When it's this idea that we're going to do this little thing and nothing else, white people have been falling behind, the masses of them, forever. The people that do well are the people whose families have always done well, and they're fine. But guess what? Even when we talk about stuff like affirmative action or all of these race-based government programs that have been implemented post-civil rights, even the black people who benefit from them, it's a very small amount of black people. A lot of times we don't talk about this, but the wealth gap amongst the black people who are doing the best and the black people that are doing the worst has expanded in those 50 years. So even if you can say that white people have been adversely affected by these, so have black people, right? There's nothing that messes up the lives of white people that aren't messing up the lives of black people, right? We're all interdependent in that way. And so, yes, even something like affirmative action, yes, there have been a lot of I wouldn't say a lot, a decent amount of black people have benefited from, acceptance into these elite jobs, elite universities, etc. However, the nature of these jobs and universities is that they're elite, which means by definition, the masses of people don't get to enjoy them. Most black people don't get a damn thing from affirmative action. And so even if you want to talk about how it's messed up some white people's lives, it's messed up black people's too.
It's messed up some white folks' lives that they didn't get maybe their first school choice and they got their second, because that's oppression right there.
Again, these are white people that are already doing great. Their families already have all of the connections. So yes, if they don't get to go to Stanford or Berkeley, they'll end up in Vanderbilt or Duke. Nobody cares. They will be just fine. And so this idea that their lives have been ruined by a few more black people being let into Harvard or Yale, it's absurd.
Let me give a small example, because I always like to point this out, Lish, because people may see this black person here talking about how the oppressive natures of our systems throughout our entire government. And you go, well, yeah, look at you, victim, victim, victim. I'm also part of a privileged group as well. I'm a guy. I'm an American male, and I get benefits from that. I don't have to worry necessarily about it to the degree of being attacked when I walk my dog at 9 o'clock at night the way women can. I don't have maybe the same issues that black women have when it comes to unequal pay gap and things like that, and women in general. Men do benefit from these things. And as a black man, the man part of me still gets some of those benefits. So if there's some equality for women that don't get the types of advantages I get, it's okay. I might lose a couple opportunities. I might lose a couple extra dollars on a particular raise because this particular company maybe pays women equally. I'll never know because we're actually paying folks. And if you do that originally and you have equitable things from the beginning, I won't even tell the difference. Maybe if I want to make more money, I'll go somewhere else because I have that opportunity. You have more expansive opportunities for yourself, and you can go find something else. I can complain about I have to be lazy and sit here and be given everything on an easier level than women. But when I do that, then you're also oppressing others. And if you just don't care about everyone else, just say that. Just say, I want the benefits. I want everything for me. This is the way it's always been in this country. Why should we change now? Because that's actually what they're saying. You can be part of one of these privileged groups and acknowledge that people actually have it worse than you. It's okay. It's not going to kill you.
I mean, and it goes even beyond that. I think about myself or you or I in our position as media people. If you walk your dog or if you were in the park one day and somebody was a jerk to you, some business did something messed up, you have a microphone. You're in a position to get some recourse for a lot of your problems because of both of us, because of our position, our own privileged positions, which the masses of people don't have. It's just the reality. But, this guy talking about affirmative action and all of this stuff, like this idea that 10% of the population is something around there are black people. A few people get to go to the University of Texas, right? Few more people because they are like at the center of the Supreme Court case. That's not, first of all, that's not improving the lives of the masses of black people. Second of all, again, the candidates who are on the cutting room floor, they just got cut from that university. Those people are going to be fine. They're not the ones who are actually affected by this stuff.
I got into Michigan and USC. I went to USC. If I went to Michigan, I'd be fine too. All right, let's go to this. It's crazy.